All right, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to talk about security. We have an esteemed group of panelists here today, and we're going to go around and ask them about the latest and greatest with security. I guess with IoT touching so many parts of our lives, from your homes to your vehicle to the grid, I think security is a big deal, but it's often an afterthought. So many companies now are putting out millions and millions of devices, and then once somebody attack it, then you're going back and thinking, did we cover everything? So today we hope that we'll walk through all the different layers of security that you should consider when you're putting out a smart city infrastructure or any other IoT solutions. So I'm going to have each of the panelists kind of briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll go around with a list of questions. So Bill?
Bill Pugh, Managing Partner for Smart Connections Consulting. Again, we work with cities and companies around the world for connected solutions and smart city solutions.
Okay, Herb.
Herb Mooney. I'm with Inseego. I'm an IoT systems engineer. What Inseego is we manufacture hardware and software. The things that you may not be aware of, Inseego is a conglomerate of some companies that we merged together. Novatel Wireless that makes MiFis and USB sticks for the wireless carriers. We also have a company called Feeney Wireless underneath that umbrella where we do the industrial hardware, gateways, Ethernet and USB gateways, and then C-Track, which is our fleet and telematics-oriented companies.
Okay, Preet.
Hi, Preetham. I'm the Director for IoT Security Solutions at Subex. Subex is in about 70 different countries, 200 customers worldwide. We work a lot in the IoT, ICS, and OT security space. We work quite a lot with the smart cities, with the enterprises, telecom operators around the world, and also we work with the educational institutions in a lot of threat research and enabling the overall education sector for the IoT security.
Okay, Melissa.
My name is Melissa Strauss. I am the Regional Director for Darktrace. We are the world leader in AI technology for cyber defense. Basically, what we do is we don't rely on any kind of rules or signatures. We're using unsupervised machine learning to both detect and then also take autonomous action against different types of cyber threats. So our core technology, we've taken the principles of the human immune system and applied them to network security. So that includes IoT security, but we're looking at all devices on the network, including ICS and SCADA as well.
Thank you. So when you put on an IoT or a smart city solution, I think it always starts from the devices, and oftentimes the devices are left unguarded. So a lot of the infrastructure that you put in, it's in a secure environment. Sometimes when you deploy something on a street light or you deploy something on the side of your home, it's open, right, and it's easy access. So let's talk about security from the device level. How do you begin at the device level to secure the infrastructure? Can anyone take that?
I can start. So
Sure.
Obviously, Inseego, we've been working with the hardware piece, which is your basic level. So, like you said, street lamps, where you'll find our products and things like the G lighting solution. We have our USB type device in there, and early on, that may have been the most overlooked piece of security. So whether it be a router or a modem in the back of a police car, on the street lamps, on a bus. They're your first point of entry. So being able to harden that device, whether it be internal firewalling, blocking MAC addresses, blocking ports, disabling services, all the standard router type functionality that you want to make sure is not available to the people in those vehicles or trying to get in there or attack those devices. You want to block all of that. So all of our products are designed so that the IT administrators and folks can shut down or turn on whatever features they want, to also block those types of things. So you can block at the service level, you can do port filtering, port blocking, MAC address filtering, things like that. So that's really critical. A lot of people overlook that. They say, we're going to stick this up on a pole and just leave it there. But that's where someone who wants to get into the system is going to try and hit first. So we've been doing that for years, and we've hardened our devices to the point where we're not just offering like a security service to it, but we're hardening that device and making it as impenetrable as possible at that basic technology, or I guess you say the first level.
Right. Anyone else?
Yeah, so for us, when we talk about the security at the device at the endpoints level, I think one of the important factors which I've mentioned, hardening the device is an important factor. I mean, we have different ways of doing it. You have certificates that you can have. You have specific authentication services, two-factor authentications. But in my point, what is important, I feel, is that with different devices are being manufactured by so many different vendors, and everybody has their own way and own checklist of how they would want to incorporate all of their logistics and other security features within the device. It's important that how do these talk to each other? Basically, how do you bridge these gaps between different devices? Right? Everybody has specific IoT, or rather, security policies that are built into these devices, but they don't really talk to each other. They don't really know what is going on. So I think that is that kind of handshake or a communication between these devices, or some standardization in that, is one of the important factors of the security at the endpoint or device level.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, so for us at Darktrace, we're not necessarily looking at the device level, we're looking at the network level. So it can be pretty difficult at times to put an endpoint technology on your thousands of IoT devices that are out there in cities. So when we look at the network level, we're automatically pulling all of those IPs. So we know where things are, what's on the network, and then we also know both internally what they're communicating with, and internally and externally, we can see those threat vectors as well. And then using that AI, we're able to see not only known threats, but things that are emerging. So when attackers change a threshold here or there, we're able to also detect that kind of information in order to either alert you to it or even stop it in its tracks.
I mean, I think I look at it from a system level. It's not only the hardware device, it's actually, I look at it, let's look at the OSI stack. And so I start with, one, is it physically hardened? Yes. But cert authority, certificates that are associated with it, any device that comes on needs to identify itself and be accepted before it ever gets any opportunity to transport any information across the network. I mean, threat vectors from beginning to end. So if I'm talking to whatever customer or client it is, I want to know who are all the actors and who are the players that are in the game. And you hear the notion of we want to be able to just put devices out there and have the devices connect. And I'm like, that's a recipe for failure. Trust and know that you will get hacked. It's what your remediation is going to be, and that's, for me, the critical part.
So when a city is going out and they're putting out a solution, whether it's lighting or whether it's on the grid, what are some of the things that they should be asking the vendors or their SIs or whomever is putting the end-to-end solutions together? What are some of the questions they should be asking them to ensure that these devices, because I think it does start with the device and you have one open door anywhere that's access to it, right? So what are some of the things that they should be asking their vendors or their system integrators or whoever, the program manager for that?
Well, the very first thing that I want to know is, are you using IPv4 or IPv6?
Okay.
IPv6 comes with a lot of built-in security, so IPsec tunnels that are being used. It does add a bit of overhead, so there's a little bit of latency that's associated with that. But I mean, Sidewalk Labs had deployed in Link NYC, and they were doing the kiosks and everything, but they had Wi-Fi. They were a Wi-Fi hotspot. Mm-hmm. Wi-Fi is a known technology that can get hacked rather easily. And they had college kids that came up there and were streaming porn across their digital screens. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's bad. I mean, everybody gets on Wi-Fi and it says, you'll get the notification that this is open and your information can be, it's unsecure. Okay. So I think you have to start with, whether it's IPv4 or IPv6, whether or not there's a cert authority, whether or not there's certificate exchanges. The encryption, I'm really not that concerned about, but you got to start with your IP level.
So then once I think you start at the device, right, and then there are LAN-based technologies that you use to then connect maybe to a gateway. So the device may connect directly via cellular back to the core infrastructure, meaning the cloud, or it may go through a gateway. So, in terms of LAN technology, you see LoRa, you see Sigfox, and you see some of the others. So what should they be looking at that level? Because if you're going in as a consultant, you're walking them through each step of the way to your end-to-end IoT solution. So what would you tell them on the in terms of the technology, what should they be looking for, again, from a security aspect? You know, LoRa, Sigfox, or should they go cellular because it's inherently more secure? But it's more costly as well.
Well, at least for us at Subex, so we kind of, when we work with the customers, the first thing we say is that I mean, communication can be agnostic. What type of protocols that are being used, if it's LoRa, Sigfox, NB-IoT, some of them are on unlicensed spectrum, some of them on your LTE spectrum, whatever it is, right? But security has to be chipped in at the base layer. It should be agnostic of the type of the communications and type of exchange of data that's happening, irrespective of which medium it is using on. Because when we look at security, at least when we look at security, we look at it horizontally across the ecosystem, across all the nodes. Even though there might be some very good security features built in already on the LTE network side, from our experience working with the carriers, we understand what are the the attack surfaces and threat vectors that could reside in the networks or within the carrier's environment, which can go back outward to all the way to the endpoints and cause certain disruptions there. So while it is secure, but it's not 100% proof against strengthening the overall security if you go with the LTE connection, or say if you go with Sigfox or LoRa. The whole the purpose of this is most of the cities, most of the enterprises are diversifying their presence in terms of the IoT, and security has to be looked at agnostically across all of that layer, in equal vision base. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
The transport piece is really important, and you have to be careful when you're looking into that, because when you're looking at the different networks, whether it be wireless carrier, cellular carrier, or the newer technologies, or even the unlicensed bands, those you have to assume at the very base level those are not secure. I mean, some of the network providers will come up and say, well, we can provide a private IP network for you. That's from point C to point E.
Right.
It's not all the way end to end. So at the transport layer, I mean, you do have some level of security in those technologies, but as you move up further, you do need that end-to-end application type layer or other technologies to secure the connection from one end to the other, which does lend to some latency on the network, though. So those are things you have to evaluate: what speed versus throughput, what you're going to do, and even what type of network you're looking at, whether it be Cat 1, NB-IoT, or whichever. So all of that comes into play.
Yeah, I think they would definitely have to draw out the architecture and then show you on a layer by layer how it's secured. And a lot of times if you're not knowledgeable about that, then you need somebody to walk you through that. So I think that would be something I would be cognizant of. How are you securing each step of the way and then end to end? So companies have deployed these, and the security has been an afterthought. So what would you recommend to a company that, who would you recommend, or what type of company would you recommend for them to come in and audit the network? And I've seen one situation where the company who deployed the infrastructure was the one asked to provide the security assessment of it. So I think that's what's your thought on that? And then I would think it's a definite conflict of interest right away, right? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Definitely not best practice.
Right.
I mean, I think that learning about it is extremely important. So, education in terms of not only the technology that you're using, I mean, because inherently, LoRa has no security. There is no security within LoRa. So, there's encryption, but by the sheer nature of how they operate, you can hear them tap dance around, well, this is why it's secure because, well, okay, but where's your certs? Well, we don't have any certs. Oh, but the owner has the keys, and you can only get access to that. And I'm like, that kind of obfuscates the whole story. But I think looking at the NIST framework for cybersecurity as a best practice is probably what I would recommend any of my clients.
Okay.
And one of the things when we work with the customers, the first thing as a security provider, what we tell is, have you followed the resiliency process? Like we provide some of the initial engagements when we have with customers. The first thing is identifying how many assets that you have on your network. And most importantly, what are the attack surfaces that could reside on these endpoints? Because IoT devices are at such large scale, it's very difficult to even know where they are, what they're doing, let alone the data that is coming out of these purpose-built devices, right? And then help them in understanding what type of protection mechanism you need, whether you want to silo it out from your existing network? Do you want to put some encryption on certain networks? Do you want to put it under a tunnel where it's kind of under or outside of the attack surfaces that we have seen in the past? But having said that, no system is 100% secure. So you need to have some real-time, constant monitoring and constant data visualization. And just to add to that, in the beginning, like at least early in the deployments, it's very important that companies use a solution where it can not only just detect and identify what's happening there, but also a way to remediate it, way to mitigate it, help them come back, how quickly the customers and end users can come back to business. So the whole 5-step discovery, protection, your monitoring, your response, and your business continuity or your recovery phase is pretty important when any of these new smart city initiatives are being brought or being consumed by the cities and any of the critical infrastructure for that matter.
Okay, Melissa, did you?
Yeah, and just to add to that, when we go in and meet with companies initially, one of the first questions we ask is how many devices do you expect to have on the network? 100% of the time, companies underestimate that by about 20 to 25%. And that's usually not accounting for all the IoT devices because they just don't know how many they have or where they are. So like you said, that discovery and knowing what's on the network and then also knowing how to secure it and where you need to deploy security solutions is really important.
Okay, so with the cities getting ready to, they're thinking about their solutions, they're thinking about putting something out there, or ones that maybe already have things out there, what would you recommend for them in terms of getting an assessment now? Now that you've already deployed things, how do you assess the security threat level on your network, and then how do you implement things to mitigate that? Any thoughts around that?
I mean, I think you kind of have to start with the inventory, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing. But you also have to understand that what we're putting out there today literally are, computers. I mean, if it's running a Linux operating system, when was the last audit done? What have you done about the latest critical vulnerability exposure attacks? And you have to have a plan. I mean, but it starts with the audit of devices and then a full remediation plan for anything that happens, because it will happen.
And a lot of the inventory piece is critical because you'll find in a city environment that there's technology that's been out there for a lot longer than some of these security and some of these threats have come along. So there's hardware out there that you may not be aware of or still out there that really should be replaced and should be evaluated for what type of security measures can we implement, or do we need to swap that equipment out to make sure that they do meet up, and the visibility into that, because those already older devices, you can't see them on the network in a lot of cases. So having a platform that allows you to actually view them, see where they are, track them if they're taken or stolen, and things like that. So there are many different levels, which I think a lot of the vendors that are here can take care of a different piece of it, and making sure they, like you said, they all communicate together. Because just like a smart city, you also need a smart solution that also talks to its dependencies.
I mean, also just to add to that, right? When we work with our customers, the first thing we do is an assessment, of course, telling them that, and as Melissa mentioned about, usually they underestimate the forecast rate or how many devices they expect to have on the network when they discover it. So for us, security, when we tell them, it has to be built in early on in the life cycle. Like it has to be built or used along with your IoT and your smart city or your IT deployment, and security has to run in parallel so that it's not a retrofit. After you have all of your solutions, you have thousands of devices, endpoints that are connecting back to different parts of your network, and then we go back and say that there is a gap in this network or there's some backdoors, so we have to retrofit it. So we always say that security is not a cost. Consider it as a plus in your in your deployment. So that's the approach that we take.
Yes.
And I think this is where AI can really be a helpful factor as well, because there's no one-size-fits-all solution for every entity. Every entity looks different. Every company, every city looks different. So using AI to self-learn that sense of normal for each specific network and being able to understand, okay, this activity is supposed to be happening or is normal on this network, but on a different network it might be, a different type of threat.
Right.
So that's where kind of AI can come into play and help a lot with this.
Awesome. Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, so I'll open to questions from the audience. Nobody cares about their security.
Questions? Anyone experience a breach? Want to talk about it? Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting just to get your perspective.
So our breach wasn't necessarily IoT. It was a normal security hack via email. It got in, hit about 17,000 of our 10 million constituents, affected more than half of the 40 departments within the county. My department was also hit. We only had 5 incidences, but it was $1 million to pay for the deductible of the insurance to go out and buy the privacy insurance or protection plans for those 17,000 plus people who were impacted. So to everyone's point on the panel, this is not a cost. Think about that. And the one-time occurrence was $1 million. If we would have had a second occurrence in the allotted time, the deductible would have went to $5 million for the county.
And just to add to that, on an average, a company spends about $17 million a year when they experience a breach. And this is by the survey that's conducted, and what is the spend on security that is, that's across the globe today.
Any other questions for our audience?
I know Preet was showing a website yesterday that was showing like where you can go and check if the device is open or something is open on your network. So you may want to speak with him about that, because I think a lot of times too you assume that the vendors you're working with, that the network is inherently secure, but sometimes the device is open from the manufacturer. I mean, some websites are just bringing attention to that by attacking them, just to show that a lot of devices they were using the default password, for example, something simple as that. So, it's very important. And then you have to know if you're on a private network, if you need a VPN and all of those things. So it's very complicated. So it's good to have somebody, probably before you deploy the solution, as you were working with the vendors to architect the network, bring in somebody with security expertise to kind of look at the overall architecture and then give you some guidance on that. So that would be something I propose to the cities. Any last thoughts in our last 27 seconds? Did you have a question?
What I'm hearing is LoRa is not a perfect or completely secure technology.
Correct.
What else can a user use or a deployment team use besides LoRa?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot you'll find depending on whether or not you want a licensed technology or an unlicensed. I mean, there's a number of providers that sit in the 902 to 928 ISM band. I mean, there's a number of things that you can do, with Wi-Fi. Although Wi-Fi, you're understanding that, you have WEP, WPA2, WPA2 supplicant. I mean, there's a number of other security metrics. So I kind of look at what are the use cases that you're going after, and then how do you secure those? That's the best thing to look at. So you look at, using TLS, transport layer security, DTLS. I mean, it really is a case-by-case type thing, but it does start with your transport. I mean, that is the most critical. LoRa is made for toy networks from my perspective. And I'm sorry, I know that there are folks that actually, the only people that are making money with LoRa is Semtech. They're the only ones. I mean, so I've spoken to Semtech. I've told them that. It's advertised to be something that's long reach, low bit rate, and those types of things. But if you cannot secure your devices, there is no way that I'd put that in an open network.
One way to think about it too is like the narrowband IoT and LTE. They're done by 3GPP standards, and you have a whole international communities working on that. They look at all aspects of it. They look at the security. It may be more costly in terms of the cost for transport, but then the security in it is built in from the ground up. And even within that, you still would have to think if you are on a private network or a public network, what kind of IP addressing are you using, and all of those things as well. So. But I would say it would be more inherently secure just by the nature of which the technology was built.
So I want to applaud Bill for your tenacity of going directly to the vendor and telling them that they, what you think of the weakness or whatnot. I'd also, encourage everyone in the audience, be be candid, be tenacious with your elected officials regarding security, or anyone above you who might push back or say it's not important. I think in one of the breakout sessions I talked about, our Board of Supervisors was hacked during their live broadcast of their weekly meeting by ISIS. And for about an hour or so, we were out of control because the Board of Supervisors thought security wasn't important and they could run their own thing. And suddenly it got yanked and put into the Shared Services Division. And I think about the same time as when the state of Ohio, the governor got hacked, the Corrections Department, jails, things of that nature across the state were getting hacked. So don't let your elected officials off the hook. Press them on it. They'll thank you for it someday.
I think we're officially out of time or over, but these experts are around. If you need to talk to someone one-on-one, they're available. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.